I hope I'm in focus. Ladies and gentlemen, hello. Welcome to a highly anticipated video. One of the two only videos you will be getting this year from this channel. This is every book that I read in 2020, all my ratings, all my thoughts, all my opinions. Most of my friends wanted to see this. I figured why not sit down and have like a formal sit-down conversation and talk about every book that I read in 2020, which I think will be fun and exciting. So anyway, if you're new here, welcome. My name is Liz. If you're returning to this channel or you know me in real life, welcome. My name is Liz. So my goal for 2020 was to read 55 books. I am 50 books in. I have 5 books left. 16 days till the end of the year. So approximately 2 weeks with give or take some change. So I have 5 more books I have to read for this year, which I kind of have a good idea of what I'm going to read. I think I'm just going to keep the intro nice and short because I do have 50 books to talk about. I'm not going to get into it with every single one. There are some that I really do want to get into and do really talk kind of in depth about. This is going to be a long one. I would suggest grabbing some snackies, maybe a drink, maybe a coffee, like whatever to keep everyone sustained. We will be taking breaks intermittently, you know, so you can get up and use the bathroom, you can get up and get a drink. Whatever you need to do. Let's just start the shit right off. The first book that I read in the ripe year of 2020, which kind of should have pointed fingers at this year being absolutely fucking buck wild and weird and bad, is Old Possum's Book of Practical Cats by T.S. Eliot. So this is the book that Cats was based off of. And it wasn't like an actual narrative book. It was kind of just like little snippets. It was almost like poetry, but I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. I thought this was really fun. I thought it was very whimsical. While I was reading this book, I did feel like I was having a stroke, because it was all over the place, but I think overall it was very charming. It was very fun. And I can see like this, where Andrew Lloyd Webber would read this and be like, oh, I need to make a musical. Like, this is crazy. Next up is Are You Listening by Tillie Walden. Tillie Walden is one of my favorite graphic novelists. They are super talented. Their illustrations are amazing. Their color palette is always on point. I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. It follows these 2 women who embark on a kind of cross-country drive. Both have different destinations, but they are carpooling. And it becomes very quickly this like sci-fi supernatural kind of like adventure that these 2 go on. And I think just overall this one was really fun. We love starting our year off with a graphic novel, nice and easy, but still gets the job done. Next up is Where'd You Go, Bernadette by Maria Semple. I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. I don't necessarily remember the plot, but I know that it follows our main character Bernadette and her daughter, who wants to go on vacation to some polar continent, potentially Antarctica, potentially Alaska. I believe it's Antarctica. And so Bernadette's trying to make that happen. Meanwhile, Bernadette is agoraphobe. She hasn't left the house in years, I believe. So she's kind of freaked out about it. And then all of a sudden she goes missing, and they're trying to piece together the puzzle of where did you go, Bernadette? With different letters that she had written and like clues and whatnot. I just think overall this was really well written. The characters were written so well, and it was just such a fun read. This was really quick, very light and easy if you're looking for that. Okay, so the next one I do kind of want to get into, so now I have my laptop and I'm going to be reading notes off of it. The next book that I read this year is The Witches Are Coming by Lindy West. I really appreciate Lindy West, and I'm going to get into it. So I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. I think Lindy West has some really, really good things to say in regards to navigating film and publishing and just essentially the whole world as a plus-sized woman. I think she really has a lot of good experiences that make for an interesting memoir. This is very similar to Lauren Graham's memoir, Talking as Fast as I Can, which I had read a couple years ago. Lauren Graham wrote this memoir talking about parenthood and Gilmore Girls and her experience in TV and film. And she wrote it in such a way that really was like, I'm gonna be hip and fit in with the cool younger kids and write like younger kids want to read this. And like, it's not gonna age well is my thing, is that the style of her writing was kind of all over the place and like really was cringy at times. And I would equate this book, The Witches Are Coming, to that type of writing, where Lindy West was trying to write for what I would assume is a younger audience. Meanwhile, she just would typically write like these really cringy lines and like some of these sentences that you could tell that she was trying to be relatable, that a lot of the times didn't work, which was kind of frustrating to me, because when I read her first book, Shrill, I believe it was last year, I thought it was really well written and I thought it was really great. So going to this, I was like, oh, I wonder if maybe kind of the rose-colored glasses had come off after reading her first book and this is how she has always written. But I'm not sure. She talks about a lot of social issues and a lot about problematic shit in our society as not only a woman, but as a plus-size woman in an industry that is really male-dominated. But I really could not help but feel that this was verging on white feministy type of vibes with the whole like, first of all, the title, We Are the Witches Are Coming, and then kind of I believe the first chapter is titled like, or there was a line in the first chapters that reads, yes, we are the witches and we are hunting you. It's very much along the same lines of like, our ancestors are the witches that you couldn't burn kind of deal, which is related to a lot of white feminism. And I feel like this book, with that title and with those kind of sentiments of like, yes, we are the witches and we're hunting you, is really targeting its audience towards primarily white women, which is like, not to say that there's anything wrong with it, but I believe in the year 2020, like, if you're, I'm going to say this a couple times because there's another book that relates to this, but if you're going to sit there and say that you're a feminist, like, you can't be a feminist and not believe in intersectional feminism, and have conversations and discussions about feminism that don't include people of color. Hi there. Guess what? My camera decided to stop fucking recording for whatever reason. As I was saying, this is good, but it's really kind of giving me white feministy vibes. I do enjoy Lindy West. Yeah, I think there are pretty charming parts of this book. There's one part about guys' grocery store games that is so fucking funny. The next book that I read with my girlfriend Anne. We like to read books together, isn't that so cute? So we read Jodi Picoult's Sing You Home. And the reason we read this is because there is LGBT representation in it, and also the main character is a music therapist. How charming is that, considering Anna's music therapist? We love that for us. So yeah, this is a bit of a behemoth of a book. I think it's like 400 plus pages. So like, we really were into it. We really were like, we need to know what happens to these gays in this book. And I think overall it was a 3 out of 5 stars for me. Jodi Picoult, I wish you would just say that you're biphobic and move on from that, because allegedly no character in her book can be bisexual. They either have to be a flaming lesbian or they need to be a straight breeder. I wasn't going to say it, but I'm sorry that I said it, but I said it. It's woman-loving woman fiction, but you have to work for it the hardest you've ever worked for anything in your entire life, for the most unsatisfying payoff. You get to watch people be homophobic towards these two women. There's a lot of medical and like legal jargon thrown in there. Which then leads me to sit here and be like, Jodi Picoult, if you're gonna put in the time and effort to like research medical and law jargon, then like, why not just research being bisexual or being a lesbian? Talk to some own voices. You have to have someone in your life that's bi or a lesbian. Overall, you suffer through the whole book. You watch these people be fucking homophobic. You watch these gay women like go through miscarriages and like hate crimes and just like be unhappy. Only to get one chapter of them like actually being happy together, which is so frustrating to me. Which is why I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. If you're looking for a book with LGBT representation and you like Jodi Picoult and you like suffering, then you probably would enjoy this one. But if you're looking for something satisfying and like has your gays be happy, this ain't the book for you. Thank you. Next, this next book fucking irritates me and I don't even want to talk about it, but I'm gonna talk about it anyway. The next book is The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse by Charles May Casey. Upon initial read, I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. And the reason why I did that is because somehow this book, this stupid fucking book, weaseled its way into the top slot for Best Book of 2019. And people were fucking feral over this book. People loved this book. People were like, oh my god, this is the best book I ever read. Which, like, granted, there are only, like, 250 words in the entire book, and the rest is, like, literally just the shittiest illustrations I have ever seen in my life. This was so boring. This was so fake deep. And I don't know how it got to the top. I think if you're a middle-aged woman, somehow if you're a middle-aged woman and you stumbled upon this video, hi, how are you? I think you would really enjoy this book. I think this is, like, a book that women who live in suburbia, who have never suffered an injustice in their entire life, would eat up. People would, those types of people would eat up this book. If I had to re-rate this, I would probably give it a 2 out of 5 or a 1 out of 5 star. I do not recommend this. I think this is fucking boring, and unless you have Live, Laugh, Love painted on every surface in your entire house, I wouldn't read this book. Next book that I read is Break Your Glass Slippers by Amanda Lovelace. Amanda Lovelace can truly do no wrong in my eye. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. I think she is my favorite Instagram relatable poet. I go into these books with my expectations on the ground because I know what I'm getting myself into. I know that I'm getting myself into essentially Instagram poetry, which there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. And somehow I always end up crying. So I think this is just fun, a good Instagram poetry collection. And this edition that I got is printed wrong, which is so special to me. The next book that I have is The Tea Dragon Society by Katie O'Neill. This is a graphic novel. Okay, so it looks like a board book, like for babies, but it is indeed a graphic novel. I think this is more geared towards like middle grade / young adult, but you know what? Whatever. I'm allowed to read whatever I want. So it follows these like mythical creatures. She's got like horns and shit. And this girl finds this tea dragon in the marketplace and like brings it to this tea house where like these tea dragons live. And yeah, it's really sweet. It's really fun. The illustrations are literally beautiful, and it was good enough. That's good enough for me. Give it 4 out of 5 stars, and I am happy. Next up, we have The Gifted School by Bruce Halsinger. This book was so fun. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. It follows I'd say like 3 to 4 families in this neighborhood. All these kids are kind of the same age. They're going to the same public school. And this gifted school pops up. It's a private school. You have to be invited. Your child has to be invited to go to the school. So they're all kind of competing for a slot in the school. Like the children have to test to get into the school. So they're all kind of competing, and things get petty, and there's some dramatics that ensue. And it's kind of like a group of friends who like had these kids that grew up together and like went to elementary school, went to middle school together, that are now all like turned on each other because they are fighting for a spot in this new school. I literally love this book. I thought this book was so fun. I listened to this while I was embroidering a pillowcase, and it was a hefty audiobook. This was about a 14-hour audiobook, which is actually, it's more like 6.5 hours if you listen to it on 2.5, which is what I did. And yeah, I think that we should all say this with me now. Ready? Eat the rich. That's the vibes that this book is giving me. Next, we have a woman-loving woman book that is a humongous departure from Sing You Home by Joseph Colt, and that is Shy Girl by Elizabeth Stark. Again, I read this with my girlfriend. We love queer books in this house. And yeah, thank God. A gay author writing about gay characters the way it should be. The way it should be, honestly. Our main character, whose name is Alta, who is this butch lesbian. She drives a motorcycle. She is a lesbian with a hard L. She returns back to her childhood neighborhood where she grew up, because she learns of her best friend from childhood, Shy. This woman's mother is ill. So she goes back, and And her and this mother had a relationship growing up. It was like a mother-daughter relationship because she had an estranged one with her own mother. So she goes back home to help this woman with her illness and be with her in case she needs someone there in her last moments. And her childhood best friend, Shy, shows up, and some things from the past are confronted. And her and Shy had a fling when they were younger, and they have to confront their past. They need to confront Shy's mother's past, and they need to heal and move forward. And I thought that this one was really good. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Next book I read because I wanted to read my 5 lowest rated books on my Goodreads to be read list. I'd done this a couple years back, and I was like pleasantly surprised and excited about the results because I had read books that I normally wouldn't have picked up on my own that were on my shelf that I actually really enjoyed. And so I was excited to do it again. I'm still working on it. I have 2 more books to go. Oops. But anyway, maybe I'll introduce the book. The next book I read is The Girl Who Reads on the Metro by Christine Ferré-Fleury. I took French, can you tell? Fuck. Anyway, I really enjoyed this one. I gave this a 5 out of 5. It was so enjoyable, and look at it, so teeny tiny, so easy to read. And it follows this woman who meets this bookseller, and he essentially recruits these people that will observe people on the metro or observe people like in parks, and they'll recommend books to them, or they'll pass on books to those people, whoever's giving them the best vibes, you know. She forms a relationship with this guy and his younger daughter, and she becomes one of these people who are passing books on to people. So she has this opportunity to like create these relationships, and she does. She creates a lot of like really lovely relationships. And then in the end, I'm not going to spoil it, but something happens to the bookseller, which then results in her kind of picking up on the book selling, book passing business. And in the end, she buys a bus and she fixes it up, and she kind of travels and passes books on to other people, which is a dream and a half. I wish that were me. But this one was really enjoyable. This one was really fun, very light. Next book I read is Ghosts by Raina Telgemeier. This is a middle grade graphic novel. And let me tell you, this is perfect. I'm obsessed. Gave this 5 out of 5 stars. And I think it is so funny to me that I gave this 5 out of 5 stars because I'll read any kind of young adult fiction, which you will probably see in the next the next book, literally. Anytime I read anything young adult, I'm like, ugh, this is garbage. This wasn't written for me. Why would I want to read this? This is bullshit. This is the worst thing I've ever written. This is so dumb. But then I'll read like middle grade graphic novels and I'll be like, this is the peak of fine literature. This is everything I've ever wanted to read in my life. This is the most beautifully crafted piece of literature I've ever read. This book talks about so many things. This talks about familial relationships, the relationships between 2 sisters, the relationship between a tween and her parents, the relationship between a tween and another tween, and the relationship between oneself and one's heritage. And it talks about you know, being courageous and being loyal, and the importance of friendship and the importance of family. It also talks about cystic fibrosis, which I thought was kind of fun, which I thought was kind of cool because like I have a friend with cystic fibrosis and I still know nothing about it. So I feel like this is a really good book to read to like understand what cystic fibrosis is. Yeah, I really enjoyed this. I gave this 5 out of 5. I thought that this was quite literally perfect. And I would recommend it to anyone who likes a good middle grade graphic novel. The next book I read is The Queen of Everything by Deb Cletty. Now, I am a Deb Cletty stan. Deb Cletty was like my Sarah Dessen in my like formative young adult years. She has an entire roster of really well written books that are so good, so fun. So I was like, oh, I'm gonna read all of them this year. Did I? No, I only read this one. But The Queen of Everything is the first book that she published and arguably her worst. This book was so dull. I was bored out of my mind. I could not even tell you the plot. Nothing even happened. It took me like months to read because I was so unmotivated. So if you're looking to get into Dub Colleti, which like I don't know anyone who is, but if you are, don't start with this one because it is the worst one, and that's all I have to say on that. The next book that I read is Laura Dean Keeps Breaking Up With Me by Rosemary Valero O'Connell and Marika Tamaki. This book is amazing. I gave this one 5 out of 5. I think I gave almost all of the graphic novels that I read this year 5 out of 5. But this one was really special. It's a LGBT graphic novel. Our main character is gay and her girlfriend keeps breaking up with her. I don't remember the plot, but I do know that the representation was really good. The illustrations were amazing. And I would definitely recommend this for someone who wants to read some gay graphic novels. Keeping on theme for gay graphic novels, I then read Heartstopper Volume 1, Volume 2, and Volume 3 by Alice Oseman. So I was hesitant to go into these because I had read Radio Silence by Alice Oseman last year, and I felt as though Radio Silence was really hyped up. It had a lot of, you know, very high accolades. People were talking about it. People were really excited about it. And I felt like it really just didn't live up to my standards. Again, it's a young adult book, and I know that it wasn't written for me, but still I was just like going in with high expectations, was sorely disappointed. These books, however, they started as an online comic series that I had tried to read on Tumblr and I just could not get into, unfortunately. So when I picked these up, I was like super excited to have them in physical book form. And I'm obsessed with this couple, Charlie and Nick. I think they are so sweet. Again, 3 volumes deal with important topics such as coming out, coming to terms with your sexuality, you know, relationships with your family, relationships with your friends. They talk about homophobia and kind of like being comfortable with who you are. With these graphic novels, you get a really authentic queer relationship, which is something that I appreciate, especially being in an LGBT relationship, being in a gay relationship myself. It's nice to have representation, and it's nice to see a couple being represented as like happy. So yeah, I cannot recommend these highly enough. I read all 3 of them in a night. They are just so fun. They are so sweet. And the illustrations are literally crazy. So right now, I don't know what number we're on, but I know that I will be taking a break. So everyone get up. Here, I'll drink with you. Let's get a glass of water, take a sip, and use the bathroom if you need to, and we'll go from there. This break can't be too long though because the sun is going down and I'm about to lose like pretty good lighting. So we're gonna pick up the pace. We're gonna keep going. Okay, go take a break. Love you all. See you in a second. Bye. Welcome back. We're back. I hope you had a nice break. I hope you used the bathroom. I hope you got a drink, maybe a coffee, maybe a little snacky. We're back and we're gonna keep going. We gotta get this shit going. At this point, it's gonna be a 5-hour video of you having to listen to me talk about shit that you probably don't want to listen to. But you know what? Thank you for your support. Thanks for watching. If you want to subscribe, I put out 2 videos every year. Next year, it's gonna be probably just this, but 2021 version. So, yeah. Let's get right back into this shit and talk about the next book that I read, which is Twice in a Blue Moon by Christina Lauren. This book gave me a fucking headache, and I'll tell you why. So I gave this 3.5 stars. If I probably had to rate it currently in the current time of my existence, I'd probably give it a 2 and a 2 star. 2 out of 5 star. I just did not think this book was good, which is so disappointing to me. It is so disappointing to me that I didn't think this book was good, because The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren was my favorite book of 2019, and this was such a far cry from that book that it left me feeling really wary of any future Christina Lauren book that I may read. So it follows this girl whose father is this Hollywood actor. He's this like big name Hollywood star. and they're estranged. Like, her mother and her father are divorced, and like she barely sees her dad, like only on holidays or whatever. So she meets this guy on a vacation in England. She meets this guy and his grandpa, and like they immediately hit it off. She's like obsessed with him. Also, she's a teenager. Sorry, she's about 17 or 18. I think she just graduated high school, or she's going to graduate high school this year. I don't know. But she meets this guy. They fall in love. I believe they have sex, and she divulges a lot of private information onto him, which then he and his grandfather leave the UK, and they tell the tabloids all this information that this woman just told her. So upon hearing that, she is feeling betrayed. She's feeling betrayed. She's feeling hurt. She perhaps may never trust another human being ever again. Fast forward, I think it's 10 years. She's on a movie set. She's working with her dad because now she's an actress all of a sudden. Who knew where that came from? But she's an actress. She's on a movie set with her dad. And who comes rolling up but this guy who told the tabloids all of her private information X amount of years ago. And so now she's feeling conflicted. She's like, oh, it's you. You really hurt me. But oh, now you're really hot. So I'm like, might be into you. The reasons why I hate this book so much is because they never really have a conversation about what happened. Or they did have a conversation about what happened, but it wasn't sufficient enough for me to believe that she would be like, okay, I forgive you, like, let's date. Like, I just don't think that it's very believable. Also, I feel like the characters never matured past the age of 18. They stay these, like, really immature beings, which is disappointing. There's no chemistry between them at all. And, like, this book made me feel really disappointed and, like, I wish I hadn't read this. It would waste my time, but whatever. It was okay. It just wasn't, I wouldn't recommend it, to be honest. I would not recommend this to you. Next book that I read is The Vacationers by Emma Straub. This book, oh, it's so fun. This book is so fun. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. So my thing with this book is that you're going to go into it and you're going to be reading this and you're going to be like, wow, every character in this book fucking sucks. No character has any redeeming qualities. I will preface this by saying that. It follows this wealthy family who lives in Manhattan as they go on a Mediterranean vacation. One of the mother's friends has a vacation house. They go and they're like enjoying their summer vacation, and like there's some drama, there's some shit that's like messy family drama. I won't get into it. But all you need to know is that every character sucks. All of them are so irritating. The mother in this book makes me want to kill myself. This mother makes me want to rip every single piece of my hair out of my head one at a time. Like, she is so irritating. The daughter is also irritating. She is dumb as fuck. The older brother is a baby. He is 30 years old, but he has a maturity level of a 15-year-old. He is a fucking baby. The only character is the brother's girlfriend, and she leaves halfway through the book. So at that point, I'm like, well, this fucking sucks. But you know what? It was messy, it was annoying, it was fun, and just like something about the way it was written was just like so charming and just made it so enjoyable to read. Like, I literally enjoyed this book so much. I think it was great. Yeah, I think this is like really appropriate to read during the summer. I read this during the summer and I was like, oh, this is so vibey. Like, they're in the Mediterranean and I'm also vibing in the summer. But yeah, I was like hoping that the plane would crash at the end of the book when they were going home, but no such luck. The next book that I read is The Reckless Oath We Made by Bryn Greenwood. I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed this one. Bryn Greenwood, I read at this point, I think 2 or 3 years ago, All the Ugly and Wonderful Things, which was my favorite book of, I think, 2018. It was just written so well, and like it was written in a way that made me feel really uncomfortable. But I think that is why I enjoyed it, because it was so raw and so emotional and like made me feel like which is exactly how I feel about this book. This book literally took me forever to read. Yeah, I feel like I don't really want to get into the plot of it because I'll be talking about this for like 7.5 hours because she is a chunky one. But there's pretty much 2 main characters. This one woman who is like 6 foot tall. She has a wonky hip, and her sister is kidnapped, and so she is put in charge of her young nephew. And her mother's a hoarder, so she like lives a pretty messy life. But she meets this guy named Gentry, who is an autistic man who speaks in ye olde English and thinks he is a knight and kind of lives his life as this medieval knight. But he is in love with her. He is in love with the main character, and so he kind of like protects her and does her biddings and will like do whatever she asks him to do. This was kind of slow to get into. It took me a really long time to assimilate to the switch between regular written novel English and like the ye olde English in which Gentry's chapters are written in. It took a lot of my brain capacity to be like, oh, we're now speaking like we are medieval men in a castle. Bryn Greenwood does like an amazing job at writing books that make me feel like I shouldn't be reading them. Like they make me feel really icky and make me feel like I'm kind of like a voyeur looking into a life that I shouldn't be looking into. But I think that is why I appreciate her writing. Next book. My favorite book of the year. Top book of 2020, hands down. I am so excited about this book, and that is Such a Fun Age by Koehler-Crean. My friend Victoria recommended it to me. Thanks, Vic. Thanks, girlie. You're the best. And I think that this book is really important. I think that it is written so well, and I think that literally everyone should read this book. Koehler-Crean, this is her first novel, and I think as a first novel it is really strong, and I literally cannot wait to see what else she has to write. I am on my tippy toes waiting. So it follows 25-year-old main character Amira. She is living in Philly, and she doesn't have a full-time job. She doesn't have a full-time job that offers her medical coverage. She's trying to get her life together, and she is working as this babysitter for a 2-year-old named Briar, who is the daughter of a lifestyle blogger, Alex, and a news anchor on the local news station. So Alex, lifestyle blogger, like will reach out to brands and like get free shit and like write reviews on them. And so she's in the process of writing a book of letters that she had written to brands. And it's kind of like a self-help, like white feministy type of book. But one night, something happens at their house, so they call Amira, and Amira has to come and pick up Briar and take her out of the house while there's a police investigation. So Amira takes Briar to like a Whole Foodies type of like local organic grocery store, where she is then approached by a security guard who claims that a white woman spotted her kidnapping the 2-year-old that she is with. Conflict ensues where Amira is like, no, I'm her babysitter, and this woman's like, well, it looks like you were stealing her, and like, why are you in a party dress? Because Amira was out at a nightclub with her friends. The rest of the book, lifestyle blogger mommy Alex is trying to establish a relationship between herself and Amira, and is essentially trying to become this activist and this white hero for this black woman who has been profiled and stereotyped against. Now, at the same time, Amira starts dating this white guy who was at the grocery store when she was confronted by the security guard, and that relationship is kind of bizarre because that guy is also kind of like, I only date black women, and he drops the N-word, which was jarring. And this novel kind of talks about the difference between being an ally and being an activist versus performative allyships and performative activism. Alex, the blogger, is essentially just being an ally and is kind of doing like performative allyship for her own benefit and her own gain, because she wants to be perceived as this white woman who is woke and who is helping this black girl out of, you know, the situation that she was in. But in reality, it's just like this really icky and cringy and inappropriate way that she approaches it and handles it. And I think this is really important to read, especially as a white woman. It was very enlightening to read and being like, oh fuck, okay, so that is not what I'm gonna do. But yeah, I think this is really well written. I think this is a really, really great book. It's also a quick read, so fun, and I cannot wait to see what Koehler-Crean has coming. Next up, I have Nocturnal by Wilder. This again is an Instagram poetry type of book. I met Wilder back in 2018 at BookCon. I sat through an poetry on social media panel, and afterwards there was like a Q&A type of, if you want to get your book signed, like come back to this booth. So we went back to the booth, and this woman was so sweet, and she gave me this book for free, which was so nice. And she also signed it and wrote, Liz, you are always enough light. That's so fucking nice. I could cry. That was literally so fucking nice. But yeah, I think I really did enjoy this. Again, I went in with a certain type of expectation, so I like knew exactly what I was going into. Yeah, again, collection of poetry, short, staccato-y, super easy to read, super fun. There's illustrations in it, which is great. And I gave it a 4 out of 5. Okay, so this is the part of the year. I believe we're either in September, end of August, or beginning of September. I'm realizing that I'm severely behind my Goodreads reading goal, and so this is the point in which I start banging out books. I start listening to audiobooks all the fucking time. I start reading all the time. This is where I like really start getting my shit together, and where I read a lot of really fucking amazing books, which is included in the next one. Stephen King, Pet Sematary. This is my first King that I have ever read in my life. And it was so fun. It was so fucking fun. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I thought that this book was so scary. I thought that it was wordy. There's a lot of words in this book. Look at it. He's a chunky one. But you know what? I think it was really good. I had a really good time reading it. And it scared the shit out of me. It literally scared the shit out of me. There are several scenes in this book that really kept me up at night, that really made me go, I don't fucking like it. What I have to say about Stephen King and what I have to say about this book is that, yes, he overwrites. Yes, he is problematic. He has said the N-word in, I don't know if it was this one or Misery, but he has said the N-word. That is not acceptable. He should not be saying the N-word. I did enjoy this book. I thought this book was great. And I did read another King coming up. I hope everyone's expectations on this video were exceptionally low, because that's exactly what you're getting. Next book, my first 1 out of 5 star rating of the year. I read this book and I immediately gave it away because I was like, I hate this book. I hate everything about this book. And it was on my Goodreads lowest rated list. This is the 3rd one that I read off that list, and that is Little Rex by Meredith Miller. I don't care about this book at all. I literally don't care about this book at all. I don't remember the plot. It was fake deep. It really tries too hard to get absolutely nowhere. I don't remember the plot. I don't care about the characters. There could have been one character, main character, or there could have been 5 main characters, and I couldn't be able to tell the difference. It's poorly written, really boring. Don't waste your time on this at all. Next book I read, Beach Read by Emily Henry. This book was an absolute joy. This book was so much fun to read. I give this 4 out of 5 stars. Follows our main characters, who are 2 authors. They met in graduate school, and they were kind of rivals because the woman wrote romance and the male wrote like thriller suspense. They had a fling in school, they had a falling out, and they hadn't talked to each other. But then they end up being neighbors because the woman's father dies and he has a lake house, so she has to go clean it out, and it turns out that this guy, Gus, I believe his name is her neighbor. And so they have like kind of a tumultuous start back to their relationship, but in the end, like, they click and they end up falling in love, which is so charming. I'm obsessed. It was really fun. It was a nice end of summer read. The next book I read is I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Ian Reid. This was creepy, really creepy. I read this one because Netflix was coming out with a movie adaptation for it, and I wanted to read it before I watched it. So I ended up giving this guy 4 to 5 stars. I was spooked. I was really spooked. Some of the dialogue in the book was really confusing, but I think the ending was really satisfying, especially in the book. And I also really enjoyed how short it was, because after I finished it, I was like, oh, I want to read this again, which was exactly the author's intention, is to have this book be as short as possible. You get to the end, you get the plot twist, you're like, oh shit, I want to read it again, to like look out for clues. And I thought the book was really good. I thought it was really spooky. I thought it really like kind of messed with my mind. I didn't know where it was going until the end. I hated the movie. I thought the movie was really weird. I think it was a bad adaptation. I did, however, think that some of the cinematic elements were really interesting, such as the characters changing clothes halfway through a scene. So you're kind of like thrown and like you understand that something is off and like not everything is completely right. I thought that was really interesting. But yeah, this one's spooky. This one like really messed with your mind. I really, really enjoyed this one. Okay, so like hear me out on the next one, but this one was actually really good. And that is Never Say Never by Linda Hill. You have to listen to me on this one. You have to trust me on this one when I say that this one is decent. This is a good woman-loving woman book. And let me explain. So this was published in 1996. It was written by a gay woman. I looked at the cover and I said, oy vey, this is fucking crazy and there's no way that this is going to be good. but I literally enjoyed this book so much. I liked this book so much. I would even say that I loved this book so much. It was really fun. Our gays get their happy ending, which they deserved. But it follows this lesbian and she's on a work project with another woman who she's interested in, and when the woman finds out that she's gay, she's kind of like, I don't know, man, like that's pretty weird to me, and is like really acting very off. But then turns out she's like, I acted off because I'm also in love with you, which like, kill me, that is so sweet. Anyway, I really don't think that this was outdated, and I also don't think it was like dated enough that it was problematic. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed this one, and I'm really excited that I read it. Next book I read is Luster by Raven Leilani. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. This book gave me the ick in a really good way. So it follows this black woman who's like trying to get her life together. She gets evicted from her apartment because she can't afford to pay rent. And at the same time, she's having a relationship with this old white man who's in an open relationship with his wife. So they're dating slash having a relationship. And so she ends up going to live with him and his wife while she figures out her living situation. But it turns out that they have an adopted black daughter who she essentially becomes this like role model slash figure that this girl can relate to. And it's just, they have a really, every character in this book has a really bizarre relationship. The main character is really, really off. Like she's quite off-putting, her personality. And it's just kind of like overall really bizarre. It's really awkward and it's really messy, but I really enjoyed it. It's also written really, really well, and I also believe that this is this author's debut novel. Really solid first novel. The next book I read is called Olive's Ocean by Kevin Henkes. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I thought this book was so, so sweet. Anne grew up reading this book, is very fond of it. So when I was visiting her in Brooklyn one weekend, I picked it up. I read it in a day. I couldn't put it down. It follows this girl named Martha, and before she leaves on a family vacation that her family goes on every year to her grandmother's house, a mother of one of her classmates who had died this previous year shows up to her and shares with her a letter that this daughter had written in her journal before she died, about how Martha is the nicest girl in her class and how she wishes that she could be friends with Martha. So Martha is kind of like struck by that, and she's kind of like, oh, I don't know what to do with this information. And then she goes away on vacation and enjoys a summer with her parents at her grandma's house. I think overall the book was really sweet. I think it was really sweet that my girlfriend shared it with me because it was one of her favorite books, and like, not to be corny, but I think that's pretty special to me. The relationships between the characters were written really, really well for a middle grade novel. There's one character who is like this pretentious film snob, like one of the neighbors who Martha has a crush on is like so pretentious and is making like the most ridiculous film you can ever imagine. And so I finished the book and I was like, okay, he's definitely going to NYU, like there's no other explanation for this. Again, this is another middle grade novel that I read and that I will like praise endlessly, and that I think is like one of the best books that I have ever read. Meanwhile, any young adult book, I'm literally like, you are the fucking worst. Next book is called Pretty Girls by Karen Slaughter. I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. This is a thriller, mystery, horror novel. I had never read anything by Karen Slaughter, but I heard that she's a pretty good thriller, mystery, horror novel author. Okay, so with this book, I think it probably could have been half the length and could have been just as effective, if not more effective. I just think that this was really lengthy. For what reason? I don't know. Follows this family, these 2 daughters. 20 years ago, their third sister was abducted and murdered. The father becomes completely obsessed, completely into this mystery, trying to solve it, trying to find where his daughter went. So now 20 years later, another young girl goes missing, and the middle child, her husband, is murdered. So the middle sister, whose husband was allegedly murdered, actually faked his death. And he faked his death because he was involved with the kidnap and murder of third sister and also this new girl who was kidnapped and presumably murdered. And so he's essentially just a psychopath, and they figure this out when they like search his old childhood home, I believe, and they find all these tapes of these people being murdered. Like, they're essentially just snuff films. So they're like, oh shit, what the fuck? This is where things get like irritating to me, is that like not once do they contact like the FBI or the police or anything. Like, they just take everything into their own hands. and they're like essentially just putting themselves in danger. And I think that like a lot of grief could have been saved if they had maybe like, I don't know, contacted the authorities or something. But that is just me. That is just what I'm saying. And if they had done that, then who knows, maybe there won't be a novel. So, but I just found the characters to be really stupid, to make a lot of mistakes, and just be like overall really frustrating. At the end of the day, it is still a pretty fun thriller. If you're into that. Keeping in theme with the thriller mystery horror, I read Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. This is Riley Sager's most recent book that was published this year, and the first Riley Sager book that I have ever read. I was excited to read this. I really was ready for this to be spooky, 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 which it was. It was fun. It was kind of like a haunted house type thriller. It was very reminiscent of Hill House, where like this family buys this house to renovate it and to live in it. But then they only last like 14 days before they flee in the middle of the night. I gave this 4 out of 5. I just thought this was fun and spooky and like very appropriate for the season that I read it in. But I will say that Riley Sager does this thing where he only writes female characters, and he's a man. He is a man. And he writes these female characters that are kind of hard to relate to, because he's a man and he doesn't know how to write female characters. So that is one qualm that I have about this book. And another qualm that I have about this book is that I think the main character should have been in love with her business partner. This main character is a construction lady. She likes building houses and renovating houses, and her partner is an architect, and they should have been together and in love. And that's my only qualm about this book. This was fun. We are more than halfway through the list. We have 20 more books to talk about, which seems like a lot. But we got through 30, so proud of us. The next book that I read is Hidden by Helen Frost. This book is so fucking good. It literally blew my mind when I read it. It is so good. I give it a 5 out of 5. Like I think it's perfect. It follows these two young girls, I think when they're about 8 years old, named Dara and Ren. So Ren is inadvertently kidnapped. So Dara's father steals Ren's mother's minivan, and Ren is in the backseat and he doesn't know it. So he brings the minivan back to their house, and Ren is in it, and she's like, oh shit, how am I gonna get out of this? And so she is pretty much hidden in the minivan for I think about 36 hours, and she eventually gets out and escapes and is found, and Dara's father is arrested. Like 5 to 7 years later, they're teenagers, they're at a summer camp, and Dara and Ren meet again. So Ren's whole life has she's been trying to live like a normal life, like not be that girl who was kidnapped. And Dara is kind of still dealing with the aftermath of the arrest of her father. So the two girls meet up at summer camp and they kind of talk about what happened, and they form a friendship, which is really lovely. I really like this book. It is written in prose, so it's super easy to read. The first half is from Ren's perspective, and the second half is half from Ren, half from Dara's perspective. I think my only critique of this book is that I would prefer it if it had been written as like an actual book, like as an actual narrative. I think that the plot is really interesting, and I think that they have like some pretty great characters to work from. So I wish it had been a bit longer, and I wish it had been written like a traditional book, but overall I really love this book and I think it's really special. Okay. This next one is a doozy. But it was really enjoyable, and that is A Good Neighborhood by Therese Ann Fowler. This book gave me a headache in the best way. So it follows two families. One of them is a black mother with a biracial son. His father was white, and they are living in a home that she has worked extremely hard for. She's worked her whole life for it, and this kid is really working towards getting a scholarship to a university to study music. And their new neighbors, which is a mother, a father, and two daughters, move in. One of the daughters, the oldest daughter, is from a previous marriage. Father is a wealthy businessman, and the wife is a stay-at-home mom. So the two neighbors meet, and the conflict begins when the husband digs up his backyard to build himself an in-ground pool, and the black neighbor is nervous that it's going to kill this beloved tree in her backyard. So she sues him for destruction of property. And so that gets him riled up because he is a wealthy white man, and this is a black woman, and because wealthy white men are despicable. And essentially stalks his teenage daughter who falls in love with the biracial son and spies on them having sex, or almost having sex, and convolutes the story about how he tries to assault his daughter, and how the daughter was just minding her own business and this guy like undressed her and tried to rape her, and gets this kid into trouble to the point where he is hate crimed because he's a black man who was accused of assaulting a white girl, and his hand gets broken and he loses his scholarship to the university because he is now being sued and is in prison, and he kills himself because of this white man's arrogance and allegations against him, which are completely false. This book gave me the creeps because not only is the wealthy businessman disgusting and a liar and racist and should be eaten because, you know, eat the rich or whatever, but he also has a thing for his stepdaughter, his oldest stepdaughter. He is like obsessed with her and also in love with her, and has stated multiple times in the book that he finds her attractive, which is so disturbing to me. I think the moral of the story is that wealthy white men are literally garbage, and if they don't get what they want, they will destroy everyone in their way until they get it. I really recommend this. This was a really good read. Kind of gave me Gifted School vibes, whereas it's like wealthy white families are being fucking insane, but yeah, 4 out of 5. Love it. Next, I read Runaways, Find Your Way Home, written by Rainbow Rowell and Chris Anka. I think what I have to say about this is that I'm definitely not the target audience for this book. I don't read Marvel comics. I'm never really interested in superhero comics or superhero movies. The only reason I read it is because Rainbow Rowell's name is on the book, and I love Rainbow Rowell. So yeah, I give it a 4 out of 5 because I don't really know how to rate this. I'd probably lower my rating if I had to do it now just because it's so unmemorable. And I mean, I think if you like Marvel and you like superheroes, like I think this is a pretty good reboot. It's written well. If you like this kind of art style, it's for you. I wanted to read another Riley Sager, and I wanted to read his second most recent book, which is Lock Every Door. Riley Sager's books confuse me because I think they're supposed to be like horror thriller, but most of the time they just turn out to be thrillers. But this one was fun. I gave this one 3.5 out of 5 stars. It follows this girl who just lost her job, just broke up with her boyfriend. She's about to be homeless. She's like couch surfing, and she gets this opportunity to apartment sit this really, really luxury apartment in this like beautiful historical building on the Upper West Side of New York City. So she takes the job because it's like well paying, she gets free housing, and the only thing is that she's not allowed to talk to the other residents, and she like has to be really discreet about it. Like she can't tell anyone where she is or what she's doing. So she goes, she makes friends with a couple of other apartment sitters until one of them goes missing. And then she starts digging around and starts finding out suspicious and dark things that are happening in this apartment building. I got like Get Out vibes reading this. Towards the end, there's a whole plot that really kind of emanates Get Out, but it still was like really spooky. It caught me off guard. It was a plot twist that I didn't see coming. However, the main character is so bland. She is so boring. Also, she's dumb as shit. She's like probably the dumbest protagonist I've ever read in my life. Also, second book that I read that Riley Sager did not impress me with his female protagonist. Also, another thing that he does in his books a lot of the time is create like a side mystery or like an additional mystery that never gets solved. I think Riley Sager is an okay author. So it was an okay book coming from an okay author. Next up. We have The Female of the Species by Mandy McGuinness. When will I learn? When will I learn that I don't like YA? This book was so okay. It was just so okay. The plot, I don't fucking remember. Once this video is over, I will be donating this book just because I will never read it again, nor will I ever want to pass it on to someone I know will enjoy it. This one was kind of sad. I was getting really sad vibes when I was reading this. The main character's sister is murdered, and the whole town is sort of affected by this young woman's murder. Kind of hangs over their heads even after years after it happened. I really was also getting the vibe that this was like, is Mandy McGuinness perhaps a Green Brothers pseudonym? Perhaps Hank or John Green wrote this book. And for those of you who don't know, I fucking hate both of them. I think Hank and John Green write another instance of men writing female protagonists. So unbelievable that I really want to pull all my hair out reading them. This one was big pick-me girl vibes, big not like other girl vibes, big boring manic pixie dream girl vibes. Simply okay, nothing special. Next book that I read is If Only I Could Tell You by Hannah Beckerman. Another banger. I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. This one was really sad. This one follows a family that is dealing with a lot of grief, a lot of unresolved conflict. What I took away from this book is that you should communicate with your family and that you should have open discussions with your family and check in with your family, make sure everyone's okay. I think the family in this book really just needed to go to family therapy and everything would be resolved. But this was really poignant and was really emotional. Yeah, not much else to say on that. Next, I read Misery by Stephen King. Immaculate. Literally, I love this book so much. I thought this book was so much fun. I thought this book was so creepy. I thought Annie Wilkes is completely unhinged and completely off the wall, batshit crazy. I've only read 2 Kings, but I think that this is the better of the 2. Overall, I really did enjoy it. Stephen King does a really good job at, like, he overwrites, but he also writes to the point where it is so descriptive that it's fucking scary. I'm obsessed. I can't wait to read more of him in 2021. Book I read after Misery was Sawkill Girls by Claire-Legrand. I gave it 3.5 stars. It's a young adult supernatural. Hear me out, it was actually halfway decent and I did enjoy it. I was on the way to giving it 1 star, but then something happened at the end and I was like, oh, okay, this is redeemable and it's not horrible. The plot was interesting. It follows this kind of familial curse following one of these girls and 2 other girls get involved. So there's 3 girls, Val, Marion, and Zoe. Val is the one with the curse on her family. Marion has just moved to the island of Sawkill with her mother and is working as sort of a maid in Valerie's house. And Zoe is just this rando who is so fucking annoying and could have been easily written out of the book and nothing would have been lost. I feel like some of the plot got really kind of cliche and boring towards the end. Like, they're fighting this big, powerful entity and it's like 3 teenage girls plus a task force of like adult men for whatever reason are fighting this, and I feel like that's been overdone so many times. It drives me absolutely crazy. If we had gotten more information on this familial curse, then I feel like I would have been more intrigued. There's LGBT representation in this book, fun spooky supernatural stuff, some plot twists that I didn't see coming. Also, stop killing your gay people. Let your gay characters live, please, and thank you. Next book I read is The Troop by Nick Cutter. Holy cow, this book was so fucking good. I gave it a 5 out of 5. It is gory, it is spooky, it is suspenseful. So it follows a scoutmaster and 5 Boy Scouts as they go to this island. They're gonna camp there for the weekend and they have no phones, they have no way to communicate except for a radio. And this man washes up on shore in a boat and he is emaciated. Scoutmaster brings him to the main cabin to tend to him. And it turns out that this man has a parasite that is literally devouring his entire insides, is extremely hard to get rid of. You literally cannot kill it. It is a result of biochemical warfare tactics that the United States government is trying to get into, and essentially this parasite infects the whole troop. This one was really gross. If you don't like worms, I wouldn't read this one. This is really wormy and it's just fucking scary. It like is along the same lines as like Stephen King writing like scenes that will stay in my mind forever. Like there are scenes from this book that like still stay in my mind that I think of often that scare the shit out of me, and I think that this one is a really, really good horror novel. Hi, I'm editing. I realized that I don't have a clip introducing the next book that I'm going to talk about. The next book I'm going to be talking about is The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. And I'll just get right into it. It is an own voices horror novel about these 4 Native American Indians who all come from the same tribe. And they go out hunting for elk one night on territory that they're not supposed to be hunting on. And they massacre a ton of elk, and they are now, years later, being haunted by an entity. In Native American culture, when you go hunting, like, you need to use every last bit of the animal. Like, you need to use their hide, you need to use their meat. And these men did not do that. So now they are being haunted by this malicious entity that is essentially torturing them until they kill them. This was really spooky. There's one scene that drives me absolutely crazy. It again sticks in my brain like gum to the floor. Like, I can't stop thinking about it. It's so scary. My only qualms with this book is that I feel like I never really connected with the characters. Again, I'm not a Native American man, so like, of course this wasn't written for me, but I just felt really disconnected from the characters. I never felt like I was able to bond with any of them except for maybe one. I feel like the book was kind of separated into two parts. It was like the first two men in the first half of the book, and then the other two men in the second half of the book. Meanwhile, that wasn't the author's intention. The author's intention was to have just one cohesive book. But I think overall the entity was really, really scary. It was really well done. I think overall this is really spooky and really fun and really good to read a own voices novel. Next book I read is Wilder Girls by Rory Power. Gave this 3 out of 5. I was excited about this one. And I feel like this one was definitely overhyped. This book is gay. There's LGBT representation in this book, which is so exciting and so refreshing to hear. And I feel like, yeah, it was overhyped, but I also feel like, yeah, it wasn't written for me. Because if we could all just say it together, YA isn't my thing. YA is not my thing. I feel like the plot of this was really overdone and has been done 100 times over again. Again, it follows the like 3 main characters fighting against this greater force, which we had saw in Saw Kill Girls. So I think maybe that's why I was sick of this plot being done over again. But I feel like you can do that plot and have it be interesting and different. I really couldn't care more about the characters, even if my life depended on it. I don't know a single one's name. I don't really care about them at all. And yeah, that's that on that. It's just a spooky, supernatural, young adult book. If you like the kind of thing, you would like this one. Next up, I read Head Over Heels by Hannah Orenstein. I really enjoyed this book. I had no idea what I was getting into when I picked this one up, but I was not disappointed. I was actually quite pleasantly surprised. So it follows our main character, Avery, who was a gymnast who was training since childhood to become an Olympic athlete. During the Olympic trials to qualify for the Olympics, she falls and really wrecks herself. I can't remember if it was her arm or leg that she hurts, but she is injured to the point where she can no longer compete, and so she kind of destroys her chances of ever becoming an Olympic athlete. So after that, she tries to go to school and like go to college and learn, but she fails out because she's severely depressed because all she's known her entire life is gymnastics. So now, well into adulthood, she has no job and she's miserable, and so she moves back home with her parents and gets a job as a coach in her old gymnastics gym. She meets a love interest who she has absolutely no chemistry with, yet she falls for and they have a relationship with. But the entire time, the entire book, they go back and forth. Endless amounts of time. Literally countless. I cannot count the amount of times they go back and forth going, well, we probably shouldn't date because we have a professional relationship, but I really like you, so I guess we should date, but we shouldn't date because we have a professional relationship. And I just wish that they would, I don't know, settle or something. Like, just fucking figure it out. Stop. Just have a conversation about it. They never have a conversation about it. They just go back and forth the entire book. A couple points I want to make. I think I said this, but I found the characters to be really flat. There was no chemistry between the 2 love interests. The main character has more chemistry with her ex-best friend, who she rekindles her relationship with. There's also a scene where they have sex in the gym that they both work at. They work at this gym. They're both employed at this gym, and they have sex in the gym on mats that children train on. So, riddle me that. Why do they still have a job? It just doesn't make sense to me. Streets are literally insane. But overall, I didn't hate this. I thought that this was fun. It was light. It was breezy with some important topics that probably could have been elaborated on. But I think overall, it was a pretty solid read. The next book I read is Shiners by Amy Jo Burns. This follows 2 generations of people who live in West Virginia, up in Appalachia. And it follows this one guy who is this pastor, preacher, miracle worker who was allegedly struck by lightning when he was a teenager and has now become a prophet that can talk to snakes and handle snakes and perform miracles. It follows his daughter and his wife, and he performs a miracle on the wife's best friend. And there's some fallout from that kind of reveals some secrets in history between the adults in the novel that the younger generation wasn't aware of. So it's kind of unpacking that. It also deals with a lot of grief, a lot of loss, a lot of confusion in terms of like not knowing who your parents are when you think they're one thing but they turn out to be another. I thought that the main characters were really fleshed out beautifully. I thought that they were really interesting. The relationships between the adults, the friendships, the romantic relationships, the complicated conflict, I thought was written really well, and was really interesting to read about. Poverty is really real in Appalachia, and I think familial relationships are also really complicated up there. Like, I feel like no one ever really gets out of Appalachia unless you, like, really try your fucking hardest. So I think that this book was really interesting to see those complexities and those dynamics play out together. Plus, I'm always, like, kind of really fascinated to read about it because I don't live in the South or the West or anywhere where that would be relevant to me. The next book that I read is my third Riley Sager of the year, Last Time I Lied. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. I thought that this one was really fun. And I think out of all the Riley Sagers that this one is my favorite. I was really pleasantly surprised by this one. The plot twist really got me. I did not see it coming. But yeah, I will say this until the day I die. I wish Riley Sager would write male protagonists as opposed to female protagonists because just the characters are not believable, and he writes these female characters all the same. Like, all of his protagonists in all of his novels could essentially be one person. There's no distinction between them whatsoever. This one is fun. This follows this girl who went to summer camp many years ago and was rooming with these 3 other girls, and I think it's like she's only there for 4 or 5 days, and the 3 other girls go missing. And no one knows where they are, and they are still remaining missing. Years and years and years later, she's an established artist who paints a lot of pieces in regards to trauma regarding her stay at this summer camp. And so she gets invited back by the owner of the camp as like kind of a re-inaugural summer. And she's hesitant to go, but at the same time she's fascinated to go, and she wants to find out what happened to her 3 friends that one summer. So she goes back and starts to uncover some secrets, starts to figure out what happened to them. The mystery was really fun. I really enjoyed it. This is another one where he creates like a really complex history. At the end, it's kind of like, okay, why did you add that mystery for no reason if you're not going to go anywhere with it, you know? But yeah, I think if you're going to read anything by Riley Sager, I think you should read this one. Mostly because it was fun, it wasn't super predictable, and as much as I just said that all of his female protagonists are the same, this one is probably the most enjoyable out of all of them. The next book I read was Practical Magic by Alice Hoffman. I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. I had watched the movie before I had read the book. I had read the book before I watched the movie, because the movie a more thoroughly fleshed out plot than the book. The book was really atmospheric, the book was really fun. The book really kind of embodied the vibes of the movie, but was just much shorter with less plot. I would read the book first, then watch the movie, because I was reading the book and I couldn't imagine the main characters as anyone other than Sandra Bullock and Nicole Kidman. Next. I think this is the worst book of the year. This really is the worst book that I read all year, and I am so mad about it still to this day, and I will stand on that hill and will not budge. And that is Final Girls by Riley Sager. I gave this 1 out of 5 stars. This book was so irritating to me. I am primarily disturbed because if you go on the Goodreads page on this book, it has a pretty high rating and people rave about this book. People fucking love this book. And I don't understand why. It follows our main character, who is a final girl. She survived a massacre. Her and her friends rented a cabin out in the woods for one of her friend's birthday parties, and a madman shows up and slaughters all of them except for her. She gets stabbed, but she doesn't die. So she is the final girl. She is the last girl surviving. So at this point, she was given the title Final Girl and had kind of been put in contact with these two other women who were also final girls. One of them had survived a sorority attack, like someone attacked the sorority and she was the last one surviving. And then another one was staying in a motel when a big slaughter happened and she was the last one to survive. She is deemed this final girl. She has never received any psychological help. She has never gone to therapy for this. And because of that, she is absolutely fucking unhinged and she's psychotic. And she uses baking as a form of therapy instead of, I don't know, going and talking to a therapist whose job it is to help resolve trauma and to help you move on from traumatic events. But instead, she just bakes. And she is the most irritating main character I have ever read in my life, and it drives me up the fucking wall, and I hate her. The shit really starts hitting the fan when one of the final girls, the one who survived the sorority massacre, is found dead in her home, and it is a presumed suicide. And so the second final girl, Sam, shows up, and she's like, hey, did you hear that woman died? And this girl is like, yeah, I think that's absolutely fucking crazy. And so for whatever reason, she like lets Sam stay with her, even though they've had no prior relationship. So now Sam is here and she is acting sus. She is acting big sus. First of all, she's so fucking rude. The second they met each other, she was just rude to her, the main character. And I literally hate that. I think that's literally so irritating to me. Second of all, if you think that Riley Sager can write female protagonists, read this book and you'll be proven wrong almost immediately. Because Sam ends every sentence that she speaks with the word babe. I don't know two women who end every sentence between each other with babe. It's literally ridiculous, and I think it's the worst part of the book. So the two of them are like, oh my god, I can't believe this girl is dead. I wonder what happened. And honest to God, I don't even think there's a plot to this book. I don't even think that anything happens. There's like a motivation for an antagonist that I don't truly understand. I don't think it's ever delved into. And also another mystery that he adds with no resolution and just leaves me feeling more confused than I was when I started this book. Hi, my camera died. There's a whole section of this book, and I'm not exactly sure what the motive behind this is. Two surviving final girls go into Central Park in the middle of the night, and they become these like midnight vigilantes, and they kind of become the protectors of women. And they go and they sit in Central Park and they wait for a woman to be assaulted, and then they assault the man that's assaulting the woman. And it makes no fucking sense. It's like, why are you trying to be a hero and meddling in affairs that have nothing to do with you? And it gets to the point where the main character literally commits a hate crime against a person of color. He hasn't even assaulted anyone. He's not trying to rob anyone. He's literally just chilling in Central Park. He's a junkie. The main character like beats the shit out of him and hospitalizes him because she's playing vigilante for whatever reason. And it drives me fucking crazy, and I think that it is insane and stupid. And I just don't find the allure of this book. This book just made me completely irate, completely angry. I literally didn't even care at the end, like when things were resolved. I literally just wanted it to end. And I think that this is the worst book that Riley Sager has wrote, and I would not recommend this to anyone. So the next book is called Fierce Kingdom by Jen Phillips. I gave it 3.5 out of 5, leaning more towards a 4. This one was a straight up thriller. It follows a mother and son. They spend a day in the zoo, in the park. They're hanging out, they're playing, and they go to leave. It's the end of the day, and there's gunshots at the entranceway to the zoo. So the mother hides her and her 3 or 4-year-old son. And so it follows these two for the next 2 hours as they're hiding and trying to remain safe during this active shooter. The ending drives me fucking insane. We get no resolution. Like, we don't know if this woman lives or dies. It's like we have sat through this entire book. We have really gone through like high highs and low lows, and we really worked towards this ending to be given absolutely nothing. Also, I feel like the author does a really good job at fleshing out these characters. He fleshes out the main character, the mother, really well. He creates all these other characters. He creates this like young girl who's working in a cafe. He creates this older woman who is an elementary school teacher who is visiting the park. He creates the gunman. He gives a gunman background and like makes them really interesting. But then at the end, we're left with absolutely no resolution. He doesn't really do anything with these characters, and it's just kind of frustrating because it's like you have all these characters, you have this fleshed out content, like use it, and instead he gives us absolutely nothing. Nothing to See Here by Kevin Wilson. Another book of the month, another absolute banger. This one is so pleasantly weird. It follows our main character, gets contacted by her old roommate, telling her that she has a position for her that she wants her to take, and it's to become a nanny for her 2 stepkids, who spontaneously combust. The whole book, they're just trying to figure out like how to tamp down on these kids' fire starting abilities and to chill out. And I think it is literally so funny. I really had a good time reading this. It was really well written. It was really fun. I thought the characters were really good. I wish it had been a little longer. It's pretty short. I really, really liked it. I gave it a 4 out of 5. 50th book this year. I just finished it last night. Thick by Tressie McMillan Cottom. And it is a collection of essays written by this woman who is a Black scholar. Talks about all kinds of sociological things, such as Black women in healthcare, intersectional feminism, the 2016 election, sexual assault. I think this book is so important to read, especially as a white woman. I have not experienced anything that these Black women have experienced. I don't understand the struggle of being a Black woman in America. And I think that it's really enlightening. Read these essays and really take to heart what is being said, because it's just like information that you're not going to get from anywhere else and an opinion that you're not going to get from anywhere else. Really powerful, really well written. She does an amazing job of conveying information, and you can tell that this woman's a scholar. We did it. That was book number 50. Okay, catch you when I read the other 5. Hi y'all, Happy New Year. It's January 1st, 2021. I didn't complete my reading challenge. Finished up the year with 52 out of 55 books, and I'm not mad about it. I think that for 2021, which was a really bizarre and horrible and weird year, that 52 books is pretty good. I'm proud that I read 52 books, and I'm here to talk about my final 2 books of 2020. My 51st book that I read is called In the House in the Dark of the Woods by Laird Hunt. And it's a fantasy, like a dark fantasy. I listened to it on audio. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I thought that it gave off a really good, like, spooky, witchy vibe. If I could equate it to something, I'd probably equate it to A24's The Witch, and also kind of like Howl's Moving Castle, like just because of some of the characters. Set in colonial New England, and it follows this woman who has a son and a husband, and she goes off one day to pick berries for both of them and gets lost and stumbles upon this house with their woman in it who takes care of her and like is feeding her and tending to her wounds. And the whole point is that this woman that's living in the cabin is there to lure her in so that that way she can escape and get back to her family. So it's kind of this like vicious cycle of like women luring other women in for their like master. It's really eerie. It's really spooky. My last book of 2020 really ended it with a bang and really ended it with one of my new favorite books, and that is Something to Talk About by Meryl Wilsner. This book is so fucking good, you guys. You have no idea. This book is so fucking good. This woman working in the film and television industry, her name is Jo. She started as a childhood actress. She is Asian American, and now she is a writer and producer of something that's like very similar to Grey's Anatomy. And she has this assistant named Emma, who is like the best assistant she's ever had. Jo takes Emma to the SAG Awards with her as like a buffer between her and the paparazzi. And they're on the red carpet and everyone's taking pictures of them and they're like, oh, they look like a couple. So then rumors start circulating that they're dating, and so the whole book is kind of like used to debunk those rumors. And it's kind of like, as they progress trying to debunk the rumors, both of them are kind of like, but are these rumors false though? Do I have feelings for my boss? And they get a happy ending. I literally wept. I was literally weeping because I was like, thank God these queer ladies are happy. Nobody dies. They get to kiss. So yeah, I'm literally obsessed with this one. I also think the characters are incredibly written. The whole cast of characters is done so well. And the representation is really good. So 5 stars for me. And that's it. That's every book that I read in 2020. I started my 2021 reading challenge on Goodreads. I'm going to read 55 books in 2021. So catch me at the end of next year with another one of these videos, hopefully, chronicling my reading journey. Peace.